Hello guys, let's begin the topic of respiratory volume and capacity, which is a continuation of respiration and breathing of gases. So first, coming to the volume is the amount of the air accommodated. So coming to the tidal volume. What is tide? So rising and falling we call it as tide. When you are resting, the normal amount of air you are taking in and you are taking out without putting more effort, which we call it as tidal volume. So the amount of air inspired or expired during a normal respiration, it is approximately 500 ml. That is, a healthy man can inspire or expire approximately 6000 to 8000 ml of air per minute. So, how it will be 6000 is, we already told, 12 to 16 times a normal human being will breathe per minute. Likewise, if you put 500 into 12, it will be 6000 ml, or 500 into 16, it will be 8000 ml. So, likewise, 6000 to 8000 ml of air per minute. So, inspired or expired, both, in a normal resting without putting a much more effect. When you are sitting, you will not have a concentration in your inspiration or expiration, right? So, you will not, whenever someone told you that inspire or expire, you will be noted that how much. So, that will also put some pressure. But when you are in a resting position, that we call it as tidal volume. Inspiratory reserve volume. It will be like additional volume of air a person can inspire by a forceful inspiration. So, how much amount of air other than the tidal volume you can inspire more? Like if anyone asks you in a breathing exercise to take a deep inspiration, so more amount of air will be inspired. That we call it as inspiratory reserve volume, which is around 2500 ml to 3000 ml. Next, expiratory reserve volume. The same, after normal tidal volume expiration, how much amount of air additionally you can expire? That we call it as expiratory reserve volume. For example, it's here they have given, let me study it. Let me read it. Additional volume of air a person can expire by a forceful expiration. This average is 1000 ml to 1100 ml. So this is the volume of air will be expired after a normal expiration. So remind, normal tidal volume is 500 ml. Inspiratory reserve volume is 2500 to 3000 ml. And expiratory reserve volume is 1000 to 1100 ml. Next, residual volume. So this will be like after forceful expiration also, the volume of the air remaining in the lungs, we call it as residual volume. So that will be averages around 1100 to 1200 ml. So the volume of air remaining in the lungs after a forceful expiration. By adding up a few respiratory volumes, the describing above, one can derive pulmonary capacities. So more amount of, what is the capacity of the lungs? How much amount of air it can accommodate, that is the capacity, which can be used in clinical diagnosis. Okay, so based on the capacity, if the lung capacity is getting decreased, means there is a problem with the lungs. So let's see the capacity. Inspiratory capacity. With inspiration, how much amount of the air can be accommodated by the lungs? It will be total volume of air a person can inspire after a normal expiration. So this includes the tidal volume plus inspiratory reserve volume. So tidal volume plus inspiratory reserve volume. Assume the tidal volume is 500 and the inspiratory reserve volume is 3000 ml. So the total will be 3500 ml. Next, expiratory capacity. the total amount of air the person can expire after a normal inspiration. This includes the tidal volume plus expiratory reserve volume. So tidal volume will be around 500 and the expiratory reserve volume is 1000 to 1100. So go with 1100 plus 500, 1600 is the capacity. Next, functional residual capacity. So the volume of air that will remain in the lungs after the normal expiration. So the function that we call it as functional residual capacity, the volume of air that will remain in the lungs after a normal expiration, which will be expiratory reserve volume plus residual volume. So expiratory reserve volume, which is 1000 to 1100, and the reserve volume will be 1100 to 1200, which is approximately around 2300 ml. And next, vital capacity. So the maximum amount of volume of air that a person can breathe in after a forced expiration. So which includes expiratory reserve volume, and so the normal amount of air a person can breathe in after a forced expiration. Then it will be that includes the expiratory reserve volume, tidal volume and the inspiratory reserve volume. So the maximum volume of air that the person can breathe out after a forced expiration. So both can be the vital capacity. So after a forceful inspiration, how much amount of air he can expel out, or after a forced expiration, maximum amount of air that he can take in. That we call it as vital capacity. Next, total lung capacity. The total volume of air accommodated in the lungs at the end of the forced expiration. It will be like, it includes residual volume, expiratory reserve volume, tidal volume, inspiratory reserve volume are the vital capacity plus residual volume. Okay, so this is the total lung capacity. This is the volumes and capacities of the lungs, and this is being examined or estimated by using spirometer. So let's see the exchange of gases in the next video. Thank you, my dear friends.